Okay, good morning. I'm Milena Guiar from Thornton International. Julian Thornton and I will be your host for today. After the presentation, we'll have time for the questions. Feel free to send your questions using the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom page. Please use the option sent to everyone, not only to the presenter, please. I'd like to welcome Jan and Carl, who will present the webinar today. Thank you, guys. Feel free to introduce yourselves and start whenever you want.
Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. First of all, we'd like to thank IWA for inviting us here today to talk about meter management and how to optimize revenues. So this webinar is really a continuation from the series that have been taking place on district metered areas, bulk metering, leak detection, and overall network management. So I'm Ian Rodgers. I'm the solutions architect for Xylem's big pipe solutions and digital solutions for the Middle East and Africa. And with me tonight, I have Carl, who is the solutions architect for digital solutions for North America. So I'm going to do the first half of the webinar tonight. So I will give a quick review of what are apparent losses, then some of the problems that are being faced today by utilities, their typical utility meter management strategies that they have, and then I will just conclude with the solutions that are required by utilities. Carl will then take over and he will give an overview of Xylem's hidden revenue locator. He will then give some case studies, and subject to the usual internet working, he will give a live demonstration. I'm just going to stop my video because I prefer to present without you seeing me. So first of all, let's have a quick review of what apparent losses are. Now this table is probably familiar to most of you, if not all of you. And tonight we're going to be focusing on the apparent losses, but more in particular, the apparent losses due to metering inaccuracies. So the impact that meters have on a utility is quite wide ranging. But the two we really want to focus on is the meter under registration. And this is where a meter underreads the true consumption. And typically this is how all meters work. Very few, if any, actually over record. And obviously if the meter's under recording, then not only is the level of accuracy of the water balance lower than it should be, but it also means that customers are not receiving a bill that reflects the true value and volume of water they've consumed. Secondly, that there can be meter reading errors. Digits can be read wrong, which again can contribute to that meter under registration, incorrect volumes and incorrect bills. So this results in an increased non-revenue water and unaccounted for water levels that is higher than actually is reality, but also it reduces the utility's income. So let's quickly go through 4 of the key main issues that utilities have with meter management and lost revenue. So first of all, apparent losses impacts on the financial sustainability. If utilities are not generating the necessary level of revenue, they have less money they can spend on capital improvement schemes, operation and maintenance, staffing, equipment and training. It's been estimated that on average 2% of the top line of revenue is lost annually through apparent loss issues. But now for large utilities, this can represent a very, very substantial volume and value of water. As we've briefly talked about, that faulty meters provide an inaccurate consumption data, which not only leads to under revenue collection, but also it may mean that the assessment of the real and apparent losses is inaccurate, and hence teams go out looking for leaks when the reality is that it's apparent losses. And lastly, there's a growing trend where regulators monitor the performance of meter accuracy. And this will be particularly important where either privatization or co-management contracts are put into place. Now, it's interesting with this next slide when you look at comparing the volume and value of real and apparent losses. So if we take the left-hand side first of all, we can see that the real losses is approximately 5 times higher than the apparent losses as a volume. And this is why, in most cases, real losses would be targeted. But when you look at the value that those losses represent, we will see that the apparent losses is over 3 times greater in value than that of real losses. The reason being that real losses, you use the production value, whereas the apparent losses, you use the commercial tariff. And unless the water tariffs are subsidized, the commercial tariff is always higher than the actual production cost. So this shows that there is a very substantial value of water that is lost through apparent losses, and hence why it is equally important that it should be tackled. So what is the status today that most utilities operate under? Utilities range from having thousands to tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of meters. And they have 2 main questions. One being, how do they know which meters are underperforming? And what is the volume and value of that lost revenue? They don't know. And secondly, how do they track the impact of apparent loss actions? Meters may be changed that don't need to be changed. So they need to track how the impact is having of their metering strategy. Utilities normally have one of 3 clearly defined methods of which they replace meters. The most common one is replacing the meter based purely and simply upon the age of the meter, either from the date it was bought or the date it was installed. Or once a meter has a certain volume passed through it, that meter is changed. Some of these meters will still be working perfectly fine and within the defined accuracy limits. So changing those meters is not going to bring any improvement in the efficiency or revenues. It's simply a waste of money. Money that could be better spent replacing meters that do actually need to be replaced. Most utilities do have a meter test bench, but quite often they are not utilized to 100%. So they have a small number of meters they test, which is insufficient, but meter replacement strategies are still based upon those results. And thirdly, is meters are replaced at failure. This is not any form of management technique. This will result in the greatest volume and value of water lost through apparent losses, because meters are left to run until they fail. But what's needed is a data-driven approach. We need to take the guesswork out. We need to generate actionable data so we can make informed engineering decisions. So we need to identify meters that need to be replaced truly based upon their performance. And with this, we can also track the impact of changing those meters is having on the apparent losses. And adopting a data-driven approach rather than a fixed criteria approach will lead to a range of between 6 and 10% improvement over the existing meter management practices. So last slide, or last couple of slides from me here. What do utilities need today? Well, first of all, they need a solution that can take the meter data and compare the meter by meter. So truly identify meters that are underperforming or there's clearly meter reading errors. If we can do this, we can allow a utility to prioritize which meters need to be changed, which meters are generating the most amount of underbilling as a volume and, more importantly, value, so those meters can be targeted. So that gives an increase in revenue and an increase in accuracy in the network performance calculations. A good starting point is to use these solutions as a software as a solution. The utility continue with its normal day-to-day activities whilst the third party carries out this data assessment. And later on, once the system is improved, this can be potentially handed over to the utility, and it's another string to the bow that they can offer to their customers. And this brings a number of positives to the utility. So not only can we prioritize which meters need to be changed, and with those improved performance calculation accuracies, increased revenue, it's also proactive, because if we find that there's a cluster of meters that are under recording, it may be that that is a cause of a network condition that is specific to that area. So therefore, just changing the meters isn't necessarily going to bring the level of improvement that would be expected. So it is a network issue, and that network issue needs to be addressed. Another point can be that we may find that it is a certain batch of meters that are failing earlier. So a proactive approach could be taken to replace all of those meters before they do really start to lose revenue. But it's also important to remember that so far we've been talking about drinking water. Most utilities add a portion of the bill for wastewater services, and that is quite often a percentage of the drinking water consumption. So if a drinking water meter is under recording, not only is it impacting on the asset performance and financial situation of the utility, it is also having a negative impact if the wastewater utility is a separate entity. And that is particularly the case in the Middle East, where it is often a water and electricity company, and the municipality does the wastewater and irrigation. So under reading of drinking water meters impacts both on the drinking water utility and the wastewater utility. And with that, I'm going to hand control back to Carl, who will then continue with his part of the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ian. Good morning, everybody from California. Thank you all for attending today. And again, to echo Ian, thank you to the IWA for inviting us to speak. I hope you're safe and well wherever you are in these trying times. So with the background that Ian has laid out, we're looking for a solution now. We know what the problem is, and we know how it's impacting the utility. But now we're looking for how can we rectify that problem? What tool can we provide to the utility? So what we're going to go into right now is an overview of an analytic solution called Hidden Revenue Locator. Now, Hidden Revenue Locator looks for customer meter inaccuracies. So in a nutshell, we're using machine learning and analytics to inform operational interventions to transform how the water utility is operating and how it's managing its customer meters. So simply, we're taking real meter data, historic and current meter and billing data. We're inputting it into our algorithms within the machine learning environment. We're using all we know about the industry and meters in general, and we're delivering that back to you in a dashboard that's pretty easy to understand and directly informs how you should proceed to rectify the problem. And we will go over the dashboard a little bit later to show you how you engage with it. So simply the outputs, though, is you're trying to recover more revenues. These are your cash registers. Your meters are your cash registers. We're just trying to ensure that we're getting paid for what's being delivered and consumed. Nothing more, nothing less. We want to keep track that everybody is paying their fair share and they're all paying for what they're consuming. And if there's errors and inaccuracies within our meter data, that we can find them and fix them. So things that Hidden Revenue Locator looks for and will inform you about is, number one, is your meter under registering? And Ian already described a little bit of this issue. This is due to mechanical degradation of the meter itself. There's so many different variables as to why a meter may not be functioning correctly anymore. No two meters share the same experience once they're installed, once they're put in the ground. Some have high flows infrequently, some have low flows frequently, some have water quality issues in the area. There's a million reasons why a meter might start degrading, and it's hard to apply one rule to all. So essentially what we're trying to do here is apply analytics to all to highlight those that have a high likelihood of having this issue. We're also going to be looking for, is the meter correctly sized? Number two there. Both on the, is it too large or is it too small? And we do that based on the flow profile that we get from the meter data. So it's not exact, but it is a very good guide how to proceed. So that's numbers 2 and 3. Number 4 is the water meter read errors. So things we're looking for in this indicator are, do we see any negative reads? Have we seen consecutive zeros that are inconsistent with previous consumption patterns? Not that we're seeing a consecutive zero, but is it something that we've never seen before? Is this inconsistent with how the customer typically consumes their water? And last is implausible meter read. So that's a read that's beyond the technical capabilities of the meter itself. So it can't be true. So we're trying to identify where that's happening and the likelihood of it being a bad meter issue. So if I hone in on the under registration algorithm and how Hidden Revenue Locator is actually working. And I would say that in the main, not for every single client we work with, but in general, the highest indicator, the indicator with the most flagged meters in it is under registration. So that's really why it is hidden revenue, because that meter, for all intents and purposes, looks like it's still working. We're still getting a read from it. We're still sending out a bill and we're still getting paid. But the issue is we're not registering all consumption. So every bill we send out is less than it should be. And when we add that up in aggregate, that can be a serious revenue loss for the utility. So if I look at how we're calculating under registration or predicting that meter might be under registering, there's a few different steps that we go through. And if I start from the left here, the bottom left, the first step we look at is the individual meter data inputs. So for each meter, we're looking at how old is the meter, when was that meter installed, and how much water has passed through that meter since it was installed. And the degradation curves mean, what is the consumption history of that meter? So we're looking for patterns that are informing us to say that it looks like this meter is slowly decaying. We're weighting each of these factors here, and we'll also include things like water quality if that's available as well. And when the weighting for each meter exceeds a certain threshold, then it will become flagged. Now, the threshold and the weightings will vary by meter size, by meter type. So it's not one rule fits all. It's very, very refined for the type of meter we're looking at. So if we say that meter is having an issue, suspecting that there is an inaccuracy associated with that meter, the next step we'll do is we'll look at what's happening in the whole network. So that's the scaled data by analyzing entire network patterns. So we'll see, is what we're seeing with this meter reflected anywhere else in the system, or is this unique just to that meter? We're trying to establish, is this just a meter issue, or is this something that's been brought on by an external force, such as a wetter summer or a rate increase or a conservation program, and we're seeing this as a network pattern? Because if so, there's nothing wrong with that meter, so it's not going to get flagged. So if it's gone through step 1, which is checking the meter against itself, and then step 2 is checking the meter against the network, then we move on to trying to identify short-term variability patterns in the water consumption. And what I would mean by that is a behavioral change that might be caused by a resident installed low flow fixtures, or removed their lawn and went to a desert landscape, or there was 5 people living in the house and 1 person moved out. All of these will affect the water consumption at that meter. However, it'll be a shift rather than a decay, if that makes sense. We'll see a sudden drop, but it will establish a new pattern. So we're not flagging on just 1 month's data. This will take a lot of data. Typically, if you're reading your meters on a monthly basis, will require at least 4 years worth of data. If you're doing it on a bi-monthly read cycle, it'll be 8 years worth of data. So we do need historical context for these algorithms to really sort out what's happening. Now, if it's passed through all of these different gates and we say that it looks like this meter has an issue, then we try and create a predicted usage pattern and compare it to the actual data. So here what we're trying to do is quantify how much revenue are we losing on this meter per month. What is the impact that this metering inaccuracy is causing to us? And I'll show you a little bit how we calculate that, because that's really important from an operational perspective, and obviously from a revenue perspective, how we try to address these issues in a prioritized order. So if I look again, we're talking about under registration here. I will get the meter, this is the meter data, this is the meter read. So you can see that there's quite a drop off in consumption here from, over 50,000 gallons a month all the way down to less than 20. And it's clear to us just with the naked eye that, yeah, there's a consumption drop here, and that might be worth something for us to look at. What we'll do is now we'll scale that volume, and that's scaled based on what's happening in the network. So on average, we were seeing, for this type of meter, we were seeing an increase in consumption at certain times of year that's not reflected in this the meter read volume. Then we'll scale it up to reflect these network seasonalities. Next, we'll create a predicted use pattern. So this is based on all the data that we have, the 4 years or more of data. The more data you can provide, the better. And we'll continue what we would expect to see from this meter if it was functioning correctly. There is a start date to this flag, and we call it a flag when we say that we believe there's an issue with the meter. And that's when the mathematics behind it, the algorithms have enough confidence to say, yes, we have an issue right here. That's when there was enough confidence in the weightings to say, we believe that this is the issue, and this is when it started. It could have started a month before, maybe even 2 months before, but there wasn't enough confidence in the data at that point. So we created a start date. We have the actual reads. We have the predicted reads. And everything in between there, all this red is lost revenue. So you can see just how impactful this will be. It's going back all the way, in this case, to 2015. So it's a long time for that meter to be under registering, and all that revenue has been lost. So when you start multiplying out how many meters you have in your system and how many meters might be bad, this adds up really fast. Now, how do we create the revenue projection? So as part of the dashboard, which we'll show, one of the things that we do is say how much money you're going to lose on this meter if you don't take action within the next month. So it's on a monthly basis, how much revenue are you not collecting that you should be? And how we do that, the last slide was looking backwards. It was retroactive. It was from today back to when the issue started. How much revenue had we lost? But now we're trying to look forward. How do I prioritize my action, and how much money am I losing looking forward? So in this case, I still have my start date. And what I do is I have that used to predicted usage, and I have my real data, and I have the volume loss. For the prediction, what I do is I take the average of over the past 12 months, so I include 12 data points of what my volume loss is as against my expected usage. So I have 12 different numbers there, and I average them out, and that's the monthly revenue looking forward, monthly revenue risk. And you'll see how that's important when we get to the dashboard. Now, why do we do this, and what type of results do you see? So these are just a representative return on investments for like 8 utilities that we've worked with. And you can see that utility 1 has a 59% net ROI, and that's including the cost of meter testing and meter replacement. All the way down to utility 5 having a net return on investment of almost 2,000%. Now you'll also see by the utility size that there's quite a variance, you know, from what we would consider in the US mid-size up to, well, they're probably all in the mid-size range there. And a lot of different revenues. But you can see the percentage of revenues that's been recovered is very, very significant to each of these utilities. And even in the most conservative utility that has a very aggressive structured meter testing and replacement program, being utility 1, they still established a net ROI of about 60%. They didn't have a lot to recover because they were managing their meters very well. However, in other cases where it's going back to Ian's point of what status quo is today, maybe they're just replacing a failure, and utility 5 might have had a lot of bad meters out there that now they could identify and address in a very structured, sequenced manner, not a scattergun effect. So applying their capital spend very, very appropriately. Now, what does it look like? There's a lot of data, a lot of information on this slide here, but if we just look at the bar itself, we have a planning phase, integration, configuration, launch and training, and deployment. The planning phase is how many meters are we going to be analyzing? Is it the whole population? Is it a subset? And who's going to be involved from the utility side? And what do we expect to get back from this? So setting some key performance metrics is really important at the start. So there's an expectation of what can be recovered, and then you can measure and track the actual success of the program against those expectations. Next is the integration process, and this will be the longest portion of this whole deployment. This will where we are ingesting all the billing, the meter, and the CIS data, are integrating with AMI if that's applicable. And then we have to set up that process that the data push is ongoing. So this integration process, this is done with IT, and it can take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the data quality and the data availability. Next, we'll work in-house and we'll configure all that data. We'll run it through the indicators, we'll run it through the algorithms, and then we'll get some results. And then we'll kind of do a gut check on that. Does it seem like that's right, what it's listing as flags? Once we've gone through that process and everybody's happy that it makes sense, then we go into the launch phase, and the utility is now using this. They'll see the dashboard, they're actively engaged with it. The results are getting updated on the same frequency as we're getting new data. So if it's monthly, then the dashboard is monthly. If it's AMI, then it's daily updates. And the deployment is just ongoing then. So we're holding frequent meetings to make sure the data is being received right and understood correctly. It is a managed program, so there is somebody directly assigned to the utility to help them through this process. And very importantly, there's a feedback loop. So as you investigate results, flags that we have delivered, you give us back that information about that investigation. How did it test? What were the results like? This is a feedback loop. We're in a machine learning environment, so we're constantly refining the algorithms that are being used, and it's improving all the time, both generally and locally for the client we're working with. So this process from start to finish typically takes about 2 to 3 months. So you can be up and running pretty fast. Staff within the utility, you're going to have definitely somebody from IT involved. Operations plays a crucial role. Billing, and then general manager and finance manager are keenly interested in the revenue portion and what revenues are there to be recovered. How could these revenues be used? So it's of high interest to across many different divisions within the utility. But these are typically the key people we deal with. Now, beyond just the dashboard and saying this meter is bad and this is how bad it is and this is when the problem started, to Ian's point of looking for clusters of bad meters, and maybe that's pointing to a network issue or bad batch of meters, there are insights that you can glean from this analysis too. And this is just an example of one of them where it's showing the blue bar being the amount of meters analyzed for that year on the x-axis, and then the flag count being the orange bar, saying how many meters were actually flagged as having inaccuracies. So there's a couple of things that are interesting here. Number one, you'll see that it's not directly correlated to the age of the meter. So there are some years that have a higher percentage of flag count that are younger than some of the older meters. Now they won't be, if you're on an age-based cycle, they won't be touched until you've replaced all the older meters. So you're leaving that bad meter in the ground. And secondly, and maybe even more importantly, if we look at 2003 here, so that has a high number of flags compared to the overall, right? If we look at any one year, I think that's the second highest year. But look how many good meters still remain from 2003. So we're in an age-based cycle and we say, well, we're replacing all the meters that were installed in 2003. We're getting a very low percentage of bad meters within that. We're spending a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of resources on replacing a lot of good meters. So this is just basic asset management. It's understanding the condition of your assets and what action needs to be taken and why. So in a prioritized fashion. Here's some more insights where, again, it's showing that the graph on the left here is showing us that, again, age is not something that we can rely on. And there can be a lot of flagged meters, even in younger meter population. So it's not just older meters. It all depends on how that meter is being, what it's been exposed to during its lifetime. On the right side, it's a breakdown of meters based on their size. So again, this is in inches in US. So it's 3/4 of an inch, inch and a half, 2 inches, 3 inches. And probably what's noteworthy on this one is that if I look at my 2-inch meters, typically they're much higher volume than my residential. They'll be worth more revenues to me, but I've got a significant amount of flags within the 2-inch population. So that might be something that comes to my attention and I might focus in on a little bit more. So with that, I want to go into a case study that we have here from, again, it's from the US. It's from a utility in the southeast of the US near Atlanta. They provide, the utility is called Clayton County Water Authority. They provide water, sewer, and stormwater services. They have about 80,000 meters, and they're on AMR. They're mechanical meters. As a utility, they've got about 110 million in revenue, and they spend about 24 million a year in capital purposes, capital projects. So the goals is they wanted to be able to proactively manage 2,500 commercial meters, so large meters. They wanted to recover revenue from any meter that had been identified as underperforming. And they want to do this in a more efficient way than they had as a status quo method, and which was as bench testing. So if I look at the information disconnect here, their baseline approach to meter management and apparent losses was to do a randomized meter testing program. Now, so that was focusing on, again, the larger meters. So you'd select 100 meters, go out and randomly, at random, and test them all. And typically they were seeing about 5 meters a year would fail and they would need to be replaced. So that's what they were getting from that. Now they are also using those numbers and extrapolating out those numbers to help with other replacement decisions and their apparent loss number in their water audit. So it was a pretty incomplete picture, and they realized that. And they had every time they did this program, obviously they had 100 truck rolls to go out and do these tests, but with very limited benefit overall as a program. So the opportunity they had was obviously to proactively manage their apparent loss, with the purpose of recovering revenue to try and have a more accurate water demand quantification. If you know what's actually being consumed and when it's being consumed, you can plan better. You just know when you need to have certain amounts of water. Better capital spending. This is a crucial part of this. We keep on mentioning recovering revenues, but for a lot of utilities, and equally, if not more important return on investment, is allocating their capital spending appropriately and not replacing good assets and leaving bad assets in the ground. And operational efficiencies. We have no utility's got too many employees, particularly today with COVID, everybody's stretched. So you really want to make sure that you're using the best use of your operational resources. So we established a program with them, and at that time it was called Valor Water. Valor was incorporated into Xylem about 2 years ago. So the project 1 was looking at all their 80,000 meters. Project 2 was then, based on the project 1 results, it refined itself down to just 1.5 and 2 inch meters. And currently we're on project 3, which is looking at all large meters. And if I give a quick snapshot of what we were doing for them, we were looking at these indicators, right? So meter under registration, meter right sizing, both over and under, and meter read errors. So negative reads and plausible reads and consecutive zeros. And the project 1 results found that under registration was a top issue in terms of meter inaccuracies. And for flagged under registration meters, there was over $750,000 in lost revenue over 4 years. And now what was very interesting and informed the next stage was that only 3% of residential meters were flagged, and the average revenue loss associated with those revenue meters or residential meters were $6 per month. But 15% of large meters, non-residential meters, were flagged with an average revenue loss of $67 per meter per month. So it really honed in on, well, let's look at that 15% a little bit more. And what was noted within that project was not only was the non-residential number a lot higher, but there was particular interest in the 1.5 and 2 inch meters, because they seem to have a higher rate of being flagged than the other sizes. So project 2 was looking at just those meters and came back with about $207,000 in lost revenue over 5 years, with a precision rate of 39%. And that's based on the investigations they did on the predicted results. So you can look at their 39% precision rate. Well, their status quo was about 5 or 6%. So this is a pretty seismic shift for them, both in terms of revenue recovery and efficiencies. And project 3, which we're working on today, it continues. We're looking at all their large meters now, and they're becoming a partner in innovation for us. They've been working with this technology for a while now, so they give great feedback, get great guidance on how this technology works best. So for them, now they truly have data-powered meter management, right? They're addressing targeted meter issues using Hidden Revenue Locator. As we saw, there's a 6x increase in identification of problematic meters. They're doing a lot fewer truck rolls because now they're going out to only meters that have a high likelihood of having an issue rather than just a randomized approach. So they're saving $42,000 a year just on the 1.5 and 2 inch meters. So that's significant, particularly when you start multiplying that over multiple years. So the high-level benefits to them is they have information for their meter replacement program. It's no longer just an age-based or a reactive approach. They know what's available in terms of returns for their efforts, and that helps guide some strategies. Obviously, we've seen that better operational efficiencies. They're doing less truck rolls, less unnecessary testing, more focused testing and replacement. And they are recovering revenue. This is a crucial point. This whole effort is based on recovering revenue. And a very interesting and important point is they're increasing customer equity. So if you have inequities in your system, it's very difficult to identify and rectify those inequities. But if you can use technology to show you how every meter is functioning in your system and show you the ones that have inaccuracies, well, that means that the inequity can be addressed. So those people who are paying less on their bill than they're actually consuming, you can address that problem and make sure everybody now is paying their fair share, and that doesn't result in a burden for those who have accurate meters. So in conclusion, this has allowed Clayton County Water Authority to proactively manage their large meters, to recover revenue, and to use innovative technologies to just run their operations in a more efficient manner. Yeah. So they've been using it for 4 years now, and they give a lot of feedback, and they're a really strong partner for us. Now, I want to switch, if I can, because we've been talking about this dashboard. I want to show you what it actually looks like. And I'm just going to refresh here to make sure we're still logged in. We are not, but let's see. Okay, so I'm logging in. This is the portal we get to it. And here's the home dashboard. I would call attention to these 3 boxes as the main focus when we first log on. So this is showing how many meters have issues, have been flagged, and associated with these meters, how much revenue has been underbilled and how much volume has been underregistered. So this is really important, obviously, for all the obvious reasons. What revenue is there? How much can we recover? And is this program worth proceeding with? This is informing our water balance. This is informing the amount of real losses we have as part of our apparent loss, as part of the non-revenue water, because total losses minus apparent losses is our real losses. Now, I do have this issue list up here, and I can see all meters. So you can see here we have the option of ongoing. These are active flags, ended, flags that have been addressed already, and all is a combination of both of them. So you can see that overall there was 913 meters flagged, and the associated revenue was $4.75 million with volume loss of over 3/4 of a billion gallons. So this is serious numbers we're looking at here, and this is just for large meters. So if I go back and just look at ongoing, what I can see down here is the individual meters. So we said we 459 meters. Show me those 459 meters. And at the moment I'm displaying 10 of them. I'll just increase that to 100. Now I have information on 100 meters on my screen at this time. I have all these different headers up here giving me the information. If I want to, I can change that. So there are 22 different options here. So I might say, well, let's see, I don't need to see the meter ID, but I'd really like to see volume, monthly volume risk. That's interesting. Okay. So I'll now click that, and you'll see that I have my monthly volume risk. So this is giving me the issue type. This is giving me when the problem started, my volume loss, monthly volume risk, and monthly revenue risk. What we would suggest is that you prioritize by monthly revenue risk. So if I click on that, it now sorts those 459 meters based on how much revenue is at risk for the next month. You'll see some of these figures have an asterisk beside them. They're meters that the rate code wasn't included in the data for that meter. So we infer what the rate is from a similar meter. So that's why the asterisk is up there. So I have all these different options here, and I have all these revenue risks, and really, this is a bit of a no-brainer. I need to replace this meter because that'll probably pay back within a month. This will probably pay back within a month. If I want to get a little bit more selective with what I'm looking at, I have a whole range of filters here. And I can look at the issue type, and I could say, well, just show me under registration. Location. This could be a pressure zone, it could be a DMA, it could be a route. Whatever you would like, you designate this as, we can sort into all these different locations. Customer type, again, you can add different types of businesses here as necessary. It's very customizable. And meter size. And, you know, maybe we look at 2-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch meters. And when we can get into investigation status, I'll show you in just a second what that actually means when we go into an individual meter. But if I apply the filters, now I see within all that filters, as I really refined what I want to see, I have 125 meters with associated revenue loss of $1 million and 153 million gallons. So now I can look at an individual meter. I can pick, let's go this one here. And that will bring me in to give me details on this individual meter. So I can look at all the information that we have associated with this meter. And this is a good point to kind of say that we talked about a precision rate for Clayton County of 39%. The quality of the data, the availability of the data, the amount of data, i.e. how much history we're getting, all will play a role in the precision rate. Obviously, the better data we have for the analysis, the more accurate the analysis will be. But even in a situation where we've incomplete or we don't have as much history as we might like, there's still a lot of value in it, and it would still be significantly better than status quo. So we see that this is a 3-inch meter installed in 1990. The impact of this particular meter is it's lost almost $31,000. Just this meter, since the problem started, has lost almost $31,000, 5.5 million gallons of under-registration. And on a monthly basis, we're looking at over $1,000 of revenue not being collected per month. We have the investigation field here, and we can add this to the investigation list. We can postpone or ignore it. And by this, I mean, if this is maybe, for instance, an irrigation meter and it's inconsistent history, inconsistent consumption patterns, and it's being flagged during the winter, we'll say, well, let's postpone that to the summer, and because that's not being used right now, and I'm not really worried about it. Ignore the example of that might be a meter that's been flagged, but you know that it's been taken out of service anyway. So you might want to ignore that one. The feedback loop is really important here. So we want to keep all the results within this dashboard, within this platform. So when you do test that meter, either in the field or bench test, you can put in the type of meter, you put in the date, and you put in the flow rates. And we use the international standards wherever you are. So AWWA, IWA, we ingest what the standards are, and that's what we use as fail or pass. And that will validate whether the meter was truly, the prediction that that meter had an accuracy was right or not. This is the consumption profile of this meter. And this one maybe is a little bit easier to see, that even with the naked eye, you can see a kind of a general trend of decline in consumption here. But we're saying that the start date happened all the way back in 2016. So there's a lot of time has passed with this meter slowly decaying and the under-registration issue becoming larger and larger, but it hasn't been addressed. So we're now quantifying that we're bringing it up to the top. It's high priority for you to address. And it's really creating a business case for each and every meter in your system. And that's a simple way of putting it. It is a bottoms-up analysis. You provide information on every single meter in your system, and in turn, you get information back on every meter in your system. So it is a bottoms-up approach, creating a very clear business case for each meter in your system. So that's really the overview of the dashboard. And if I just to finish up on our slideshow here, Xylem, the value overall, there's a lot to be gained from this, the metering and accuracies technology we've been talking about. So obviously we'll start with revenue recovery. And typically there is a revenue recovery of about 1 to 5% of top line revenue. And as Ian mentioned, for utilities that are joint utilities and also provide wastewater services, yeah, that's 1 to 5% for both water and wastewater. There's operational efficiencies. We're definitely informing and prioritizing actions. Meters that may not have been suspected of having inaccuracies, we're delivering that. And we're saying, go to this meter first, go to this meter second. It's really it lays out a very clear path as to how to address the issue. You just don't have a bundle of flags, you have a bundle of prioritized flags, and it's very different. And the technology works with any meter read technology, AMI, AMR, manual reads. Regulatory compliance, Ian also had mentioned this, that more and more there's both water loss and metering accuracy requirements and legislation that's being introduced. I know here in California, both of them have, there's water loss legislation already enacted, and there's meter accuracy testing that's proposed. So both of these are coming in, and it's something that you'll have to do and have to maintain certain standards. And obviously, the more you know, the better you can plan, the more you can address issues. This should result in a less customer complaints, an easier process, you have more history on that meter, and you can address it in a more informed manner. So that's really the full presentation we have here today, but Ian and I will be glad to take any questions you might have, and here's our information if you'd like to reach out to us afterwards also.
Okay, thank you, Carl. We've got a few questions here, but we just have less than 10 minutes now. We are going to try to answer as much as we can, and we can send the answers by email later. I don't know if you can do that.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll start with the first. Audrey Noel is asking, can you elaborate on how a batch of meters would fail?
Edie, you want to take it, or I can take that one?
I'll take that one. It can be if there's intermittent supply, if the pipeline is degraded, so there's material dropping off the pipe, so that material builds up and blocks the meters. That's how you can get clustering of apparently defective meters. But again, we're flagging there's an issue. The utility then needs to go out and double check, especially where you have those a cluster of failures.
Alessandro Aldea is asking, did you ever found a situation where the meters incorrectly report an over-registration of the volume? And if so, your algorithm can detect these types of issues?
Yes, we can detect over-registration, the same as under-registration. What I would say is it's quite rare. It does occur, but it's not that usual. So in relation to under-registration, it would be a very, very small problem.
Okay, what's the minimum meter reading frequency to achieve significant results?
So the minimum meter reading frequency would be bi-monthly reads, so 6 reads a year. Beyond that, the resolution of the data is really not conclusive enough for us to put a lot of confidence behind the results.
Okay. The list of utilities mentioned had the AMI system or manual meter reading system?
Sorry, I didn't catch the start of that question.
The list of utilities mentioned, that you mentioned some utilities, they had an AMI system or a manual meter reading system?
Yeah, both actually, both. More of them were manual, but some of them had AMI. Yeah, a couple of them.
Both. Do you apply the tariff structure into the analysis, particularly when you have a block use based tariff? I don't know if I'm saying this right.
I'm not sure I caught that question. Do you catch it, Ian?
Do you apply the, Julian, am I pronouncing this right? Tariff?
Oh, tariff, yeah.
Yeah, the structure into the analysis, particularly when you have a block used based tariff?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. We will work, that's part of the integration phase. We look at all the tariffs, how they're structured, they're blocked, are there different tiers, and that will be applied to the volume that's being identified as under register. Yeah.
Okay. How does this software work with mechanical meters?
That's really its sweet spot. It's looking for the mechanical decay. You get degradation and decay within the mechanical meter that with electromagnetic meters, for instance, that you don't experience. So this is really centered on mechanical meters. The electromagnetic meters capture a lot of the low flows, which sometimes are an issue here with mechanical meters too.
Do you work on performance-based contracts?
Selectively, the answer is yes.
How do we confirm the under-meter registration after detection? Is there any standard ideology in practice?
So what we do is, and we work with utilities, so really there's only benefits realized by the utility if they go out and address the issue. So we encourage and help set the schedule for the meter testing and thereafter replacement. And that's the feedback loop. We want to know how that meter tested. We want to know whether when we said it had an issue, did it have an issue? And when we predicted a monthly revenue loss, how close were we on that monthly revenue loss? Because we're going to keep on taking that information and refining the algorithms moving forward. So it's important that there is both parties are fully engaged and there is an active testing and replacement program associated with this. It's really trying to take what you're probably currently doing in terms of testing and replacement and just add some more intelligence to it, make it very focused and productive.
Thank you, Carl. I think we have time for 2 more questions now. How is the revenue loss for meter verified without having to go out and test them? If the meter after verification is performing accurately, then how does the program take into consideration changing variables such as the change in water demand?
Yeah, so if I think I understand this question correctly, it's how do we verify the predictions within the dashboard without actually testing? Well, if the meter had been replaced, we're able to track the impact of that meter replacement over the old meter. And that could be done including and taking into account things that may not be common from a year ago to today. So there is a 6-month lag to it, and then preferably a 12-month lag before we can compare the results of the old meter to the new meter and verify whether that new meter actually is collecting more revenues than the old meter would have with all variables accounted for. It's really important in general because I don't think a lot of utilities find it hard to track the impact made by their meter replacements. So if you're putting in new meters in the ground and you are correctly getting bad meters out of the ground, surely that should bring down your apparent losses. It should have a direct effect. So making sure that that's the case is a key component of this technology. It's not only identifying what you should replace, but then it's tracking the impact of what you did replace.
Okay. I have to apologize for everybody that is trying to ask some more questions, but we are in the limit of the time. I'd like to thank Ian, thank you, Carl, for the presentation, the wonderful presentation, and for the answers. And if you want to say something and just say goodbye to everybody, thank you very much.
Thank you all. So if we get the questions, then Carl and I will respond to everybody in attendance, because I see there's still some more questions coming in. So that's not a problem for us.
Yeah, we welcome those questions. And thank you to the IWA for letting us speak, and be safe, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Excellent presentation and lots of good questions. Stay safe. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.